And we are live. Thank you so much for joining our session, Advancements, Top 5 Trends and the Implications for Your Institution, featuring Lee Ernst, Senior Consultant with JGA Counsel. Before we get started, I do want to share a few quick housekeeping items. The session is recorded, and we'll be providing all the links after this session. As you notice, when you're coming in, all the attendees of this session are on mute and off camera. However, we do have a few poll questions, and we do want to make this as interactive as possible. So you will know within the Whova app, there is a Q&A section and a chat section. We encourage you to use it. I'll be putting in a few brief prompts here after I get done speaking to encourage you to use that. Feel free to put those in throughout. And at the end, we'll make sure to address any and all of those questions at the end. Finally, we encourage you to be social during this session, engage throughout the conference, and use the connection hashtag and tag Carnegie HQ. With that, I'm excited to pass the session over to Lee Ernst with JGA Counsel. Lee?
Great. Well, Adam, thank you very much. And hello, everyone. It's good to virtually be with you. And I'll hope to make this as engaging and exciting as possible for everyone. Nothing like a few polls, a few poll questions to keep us busy this afternoon and engaged. Looking forward to being here. Really honored to be part of this excellent conference that Carnegie has hosted. We have a lot of respect for Carnegie and look forward to the conversation ahead. So with that, I want to take the next roughly 45 minutes or so and talk with you about, as Adam said, advancements, top 5 trends. What are we seeing in the advancement in the development sector? And I would say most importantly, how do those affect us? What are the implications for our institutions? I'll take just a minute and give you a little bit of context about myself, kind of the skinny on my company, JGA, as we call ourselves. I've been in the field just under 20 years. As we always kind of joke, a deep sickness. I love fundraising. I love soliciting gifts, and did that in my prior world at the University of Chicago, Salvation Army, and the Women's Philanthropy Institute before joining JGA, the firm where I am now. We are located in Indianapolis, Indiana. And when I was looking at the attendees, it looks like there were maybe a few attendees signed up from Indiana. So hello to fellow Hoosiers that are on the call now. JGA, we are a philanthropic consulting firm. So we partner with many colleges. About half of our practice is in higher ed. Many liberal arts colleges, and along with faith-based organizations, social service, arts and culture. We help organizations reach their philanthropic goals. So feasibility studies, development audits. And in the past, I would say probably 4 or 5 years, we've taken a pretty hard swing thinking about innovation. And it's actually something that I want to hear more of your thoughts and talk with you on today. As we are seeing more technology out in the field, as we're seeing a deeper need to thoughtfully engage with our prospects and donors, what does that look like from an innovative side? How can we do things differently? And I'll go into that a little bit more as well. So with that, before we dive in, so to speak, on the kind of the top 5 advancement trends, I wanted to start with getting a better sense from all of us here on the screen, a bit more about yourself. So we have a poll here, and the Carnegie team will help pull that poll together. And that should pop up soon, but I'll read the questions now, which are: how familiar are you with advancement fundraising? The options would be: I work in advancement currently, or a previous role. The second would be a little. I work with advancement staff on projects at my own institution. And then third, what does advancement even mean? What are we talking about when we talk about advancement? And I'll pause here and ask a technical question. And Adam, I might ask your help here. I can't see the poll. Is that up on the screen?
We are working to share that currently, yes.
Great. Just let me know when that comes up, and then if you can read those results, that would be great. And if we can't move those, or if we can't get them up, I'm happy to just keep on moving.
I'm pulling those up and we'll share those shortly. A majority of the staff has, or majority of the attendees have worked a little bit in advancement in projects at their institution. 30% are wondering what advancement even means. And then 13% have worked or currently do work in advancement right now.
Wonderful. Thank you. That helps. I'm going to shift us to the next poll in a second, but what I'm thrilled about here is we have a wide audience from kind of ranging the spectrum, the people that are working with donors regularly, people that are going, what exactly does advancement mean? And somewhere in between. And so please add your comments and questions along the way. With that, let's go to our second out of our 3 polls at the beginning to, again, give us a better sense of our audience. The question here is, what is your role at your institution? Are you in development or advancement, marketing, communications? And I know that some department names may shift, but we'll go with what we have here. In leadership, are you a board member, a trustee, a partner in technology, or something not listed here? And I'll pause again and let you fill out that poll. And then Adam, I'll count on you to read the results.
Yeah, perfect. Looks like a majority of our attendees, or 54%, are in the marketing and communications department. 12% are in that leadership or C-suite role, and then a few in the technology partner, and then roughly 10% are in that development and advancement department there.
Terrific, thank you. And then the third and final poll to help us share from one another, is your institution in or planning a campaign? I say this because as we think about key trends going on right now in the advancement, in the development sector, we know that so many times an institution is either planning or in a campaign. So here, I'll give you a few minutes to fill out this third and final poll. And you've recently completed a campaign. As we say, you're in the quiet phase now, just beginning. You haven't done a campaign for the last several years. We've never had a campaign, or I have no idea, or somewhere in between. And I'll give a moment to fill those out as well.
As those are rolling in, it looks like roughly 35% of our respondents are in that we've recently completed a campaign phase. There are quite a few in that we're quite in the quiet phase of a campaign now. And then roughly 30% of our attendees are in that I have no idea.
Great. Thank you, Adam, for your help on those polls. Well, thank you, everyone, for spending a few minutes at the beginning going through those. It helps to kind of get a sense of where we are and how we're all thinking about this. So with that, let's go into the first trend that I framed up here on the screen. We'll go through 5. And again, please add comments, questions along the way. I want to make this as engaging and valuable to you as possible. Adam will help serve as moderator. The first trend to point out, individual donors continue to drive giving in America, and giving from foundations is continuing its upward trend as well. When we think about giving in America, the kind of the trusted source, the source most widely known, it's not the only source, but the one most widely known, comprehensive, is what you see here. It's from the Giving USA Foundation. It is part of the Giving Institute. The data is actually researched and written by the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy. We're very fortunate, as we say, we're backyard neighbors. They are located at Indiana University, downtown Indianapolis, about 20 minutes from our office. So it's wonderful to be able to partner with the researchers like Una Osili and others. This has been tracked, Giving in America, since 1982. So what does this show us, and why is this important? We know that since 1982, when they started this work, giving in America has predominantly been from individuals. What we also know is that roughly 2% of America's GDP is, giving, which is about 500 billion, has been about 2% of the America's GDP since this started. So although the dollar amount has increased nearly every year, the percentage of America's GDP has stayed flat. Many people in the field are starting to say, how do we change this? How do we move the needle from 2% of GDP to a larger percent? There are many conversations going on right now. I'll get into some of those, but one thing that might be of interest to some people, it's called the Generosity Commission. It's a task force formed out of the Giving Institute. Our founder, Ted Grosnickle, actually helped chair the beginning work on it. It's reimagining how we think about giving in America. One of those ways is thinking about even the term philanthropy. And does that include everyone? I could go on and on that, and I won't for now. But the key point here is 500 billion in giving, the majority of giving from individuals. So when we think about all giving in America, it's helpful to think about where is it coming from? So earlier I said individuals, right? That's a key trend that we have going on. Something to point out on the slide here, when you look at the pie chart, you'll see the largest section, individuals. The important thing to note here is two numbers, not just individuals. Whenever you look at this chart, you really need to add the individual giving along with bequest or gifts that are made upon a planned gift, or if somebody passes away and they put the organization, the charity, the nonprofit in their will, and that organization would receive the gift. Individuals make up those bequests, right? They are driving that decision for their bequest. So it's really closer to 73% of all giving in America is from individuals. The other thing to note is that we have seen an increase in giving from foundations as well. And then the last piece that I want to talk about here with individual giving is, where are the dollars going? Historically, religion, if you look on the right side of your screen, 27%. Historically, the largest piece of the pie is going to religion. Education used to be the second highest sector receiving philanthropic funds. Human services has eclipsed that. We're now at roughly 14%. During the pandemic, we saw an increase in giving to human services. For example, think of food banks, food pantries, or other social service, human service aspects. We are also seeing, although religion continues to receive the largest amount of giving, that piece of the pie is decreasing as others, like what I'd said with human services, is increasing. And then the last piece here on the giving in America from Giving USA is this chart here that shows giving specifically to education, given all of your work in higher ed, or the majority of your work. 70 billion was given last year. So that would have been data from 2022, because the data is always 1 year behind. 70 billion was given to higher ed. That's, as we noted earlier, 13% of the pie. There was a just over 3, I think it was 3.6% decrease in giving from 2021 to 2022 toward higher ed. So with that, I want to pause for a moment and go back to the original slide. What are the implications, right, for all of us in the various work that we do, in the various organizations that we serve? And knowing this data, what can we do to move forward with that? The first thing that we have seen year after year, and the pandemic, I would say, illuminated this, and even more so since the pandemic, building those personal relationships with donors or prospects, where it might be, if you are in enrollment, it might be more students, but from the advancement side, it's very much with your prospects and donors. Are we taking the time, right, to be able to ask the donor, ask the prospect questions about themselves, build relationships, build trust with them? Are we tracking those that have given to us, those that are giving annually or repeatedly to us, those individuals that, or donors that had given to us in the past and then stopped giving? Do we know why? Are we able to get in front of them? The second piece that I think is critical as we think about individuals leading giving in America is reframing philanthropy. This is what I touched on a bit earlier when thinking about the amount of giving in America that stayed relatively flat, right? 2% of America's GDP. In the past, I would say 2 years, we're hearing more and more conversation, more questions from donors, prospects, institutions, people that work in advancement. How do we define philanthropy? What does it mean for us as an institution? What if we start to think about the word generosity instead? Is the term generosity more inclusive? Does it allow us to think about engaging potential prospects, people that believe in our mission in a different way? Does it help us, if we work in advancement, think more expansively about giving? And then the last thing is to actively engage foundations. Not only did individual giving continue to stay as the highest marker of giving, but we saw that increase in giving from foundations that would include community foundations, family foundations, etc. Prioritizing stewardship of these foundations, creating specific strategies to provide thank yous, updates, communications is critical with that as well. So that's the first trend, right? Individual giving. I'll pause for a second here and ask Adam if there's any comments, questions. Please let me know or feel free to interrupt. Otherwise, I'll keep moving.
I think that is a great prompt. We do have at least 70 attendees in the audience, and we do want to make this as interactive as possible. So throughout the presentation, if questions do come up, we would be happy to address them throughout, or we can leave them for the end. So Lee, back to you.
Great. Thank you, Adam. So the second trend, the traditional donor pyramid is shifting. Some of you might go, what is this donor pyramid you referenced? Some of you might go, oh, I've put together more donor pyramids than I care to share. I'll share the screen here to give you a visual, right? When we talk about a donor pyramid, what does that mean? This is a tool that is often used, definitely if an institution is planning a campaign, but even if not planning a campaign, any sort of major initiative, any sort of effort where you are needing to raise funds, a tool to help you understand how do we start to organize our gifting? How many gifts do we need from how many individuals, or when I say individuals, prospects, donors, people, and what does that look like? When we talk about the traditional pyramid, historically, what we know is that the majority of gifting to campaigns and other initiatives, not even in campaign, but particularly campaigns, have been funded by a very, very small amount of the current or the total donor pool or population. If you look at the pyramid, even as an example here, this is simply a sample pyramid. And it totals, if you look at the bottom, 5 million. But if you look at the top, right, where it says percentage of goal, there's a 20%. The assumption here is that in order to achieve this campaign or a goal of 5 million, you would need a gift of at least 20% of that total goal. So this just helps to illuminate or to show that what we used to call 80-20 rule, that 80% of gifting to a campaign would come from approximately 20% of the donor pool. We've actually seen that shift. So when we think about this traditional donor pyramid shifting, what we're seeing, if you visualize a triangle, it's getting steeper, right? The point is getting more refined. There's a disparity of wealth in our country, which we know about, that has been prevalent. I think that's part of it. I think for us as practitioners in the field or working in higher ed, how do we think about engaging a broader base of support to ensure that we are not simply engaging the same individuals or a very small handful of individuals time after time? As you see here, a bit of what I've said already, Typical campaigns often raise as much as 90% of funds from 10%. It's another visual. We've actually seen, and I'd be curious if people in the chat, you can kind of say, yes, we've seen this resonates with us, or this has been different for our institution. But we've actually seen with our clients and then in research as well, that percentage is actually getting closer to roughly 95% of funds raised from the small group of simply 4 or 5. So that disparity, that gap is getting even larger. We've seen that most prevalent in the last roughly 5 or 6 years. And then this slide here, there was a good data set from the fundraising effectiveness project in 21. Actually, Ben Miller, who is at Bonterra, I know has chaired that and has done a terrific job in doing so. But they did a study and looking at dollars raised. And as you see here, it's another way to illuminate this giving and how it looks and from whom. Gifts of $500 plus accounted for just over 90% of all dollars raised in 2021. So when you look at the slide or the screen in front of you here, as they categorize it, supersize or gifts of $50,000 and above made up nearly half of all giving. So again, as we think about taking on any sort of campaign fundraising effort, and you start to put together the structure, right? The pyramid, and what does that look like? I think 2 critical things to keep in mind. One, do you currently have the engaged relationships built with lead donors that can help, quote, lead the way? Those gifts of 10, 15, 20, 25%. But I would say just as importantly, do you have relationships? Do you have planned efforts? Do you have the resources, the technology, the tools to think about broadening your relationships, your engagement with individuals that are, as you can see on this slide here, micro, small, mid-size? And I say this because as we think about relationship building and fundraising, we know it takes time. The average time it takes to engage someone and for them to have relationships built to make a gift is roughly 18 to 24 months. If we only focus on the super sizes, right? If we only focus on those donors giving the big gifts, you won't have that pipeline built, right? It is much harder to have that next successful campaign if you're not actively building, as we say, building the pipeline. And then this next slide is another way to show that giving. Top donors play a pivotal role, right? We've noted that in giving to higher ed. 85% of funds coming from donors giving more than 25,000 represent less than 2%. So again, when we think about the giving amounts, we know it's a small percentage. How do we do both? How do we engage those 2% of the donors, that small handful, while also looking at the bottom of the pyramid and saying, how do we build relationships with them? So with that, let's now go to a pause here, or kind of a break. Make sure we can either get a moment to stand up or at least give our brains a break. This next poll I wanted to ask before I go to this next slide, it's, what do you think is the number one reason high net worth donors give to your organization? And there was a study done by Bank of America that classified the term high net worth, or used the term high net worth donors, those that gave, I think, over 100,000. But they polled them. And I'll show you the survey results in a second. But here I want to ask, what are your thoughts? Belief in the mission, belief their gift can make a difference, personal satisfaction, or I have no idea, I'm not sure. So I'll give you a moment to fill that out, and then we can read the results. Oh, you're muted, Adam.
Appreciate that. As the results are coming in, looks like roughly 25% believe in the belief of our mission. Roughly 50% believe their gift can make a difference. 21% is personal satisfaction or fulfillment, and the rest, or roughly 10%, are not quite sure.
I love it. It's always fun to see what do we think, and then how does it compare to what the results said. So Adam, thank you. So as you can see here, This was a 2021 Bank of America study of charitable giving by affluent households. I think you can actually find it on their website. And if not, it might be through the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy's website as well. But as you can see here at the different reasons or motivators here, belief in the mission, right? If we look at the bottom, the dark, or on the far right, that the darker blue is always, sometimes is that light blue, and then the very dark on the left side is never. So when these individuals were pulled, believing in the mission was over 58% was always, that's always why they gave. Believing that your gift can make a difference was a close second, as we, it looks like that was thought about with the poll. I think the important thing to look at when you look at roughly, what is that one? But the fifth one down, that to receive a tax benefit, it's much lower. Only 14.5% of the people polled said that always motivates them to support the organization. And I think that's really important. Actually, 40% of them said never. That is not important. And I think that's an important reminder, the relationship, the trust building that is critical for so many individuals. And personally, my favorite one out of all of these things on this screen here, it's the very last one. If you look at the bottom of the screen here, when you are asked, 82% of individuals polled with this question or surveyed with this question said sometimes. 5.7, nearly 6% said yes, always. Whenever they're asked, they give, but 82% said sometimes. We do a lot of work with board of trustees, regents, the volunteer leadership of organizations, and we're asked to talk about the role of the board, right? And to say, oh, we'll often hear an organization say, well, our board isn't given as much as they should. And we always say, well, do they have clarity on what their role is? Do they have clarity on why they give? Do they give themselves? And we always say, are they asked? And we're always surprised by the number of institutions that will say, well, not directly, but they should just know. So I think it's just a reminder that when people are asked, it's an amazing reminder of what can happen with that. So with that, I'll bring us kind of back to the top in terms of the implications and around this traditional pyramid shifting, right? The second trend. Here's a thing I would say: embrace data, right? And other emerging tools for nonprofits, fundraisers, donors. Earlier I talked about how do we broaden that base of support along your pyramid. As we all know, regardless of the institution or our job title, our age, we know technology is moving, at the speed of light, quicker for some, not quick enough for others. It's critical that we keep up with the tools that are available to us in our respective space. How do we use, for example, how do we use data or technology to better use our time if we are in front of prospects or donors? How can we leverage the limited staff time that we have in as strategic as way as possible? Consider using AI tools. We're seeing AI. We've actually been, using AI probably longer than some of us care to think about when we think about different customer experiences we've had. There's actually, both today and yesterday, a first ever virtual conference on fundraising and AI. It's called the Fundraising AI Virtual Summit. And it's talking about what are the implications for AI in fundraising? What does that look like? What are the code of ethics that we should be using or adhering to? And so with this, I think the key is, again, embracing the tools available. And lastly, in customizing your engagement, your relationship, your time with psychographic and wealth screening information. Actually, we've done a bit of this work with Carnegie, actually, in the past year or two, thinking about how do we provide solutions to institutions that allow staff to not only help identify best prospects, but know what to say. What are the communication messages that go along with those individuals. So again, I can't stress the importance enough of really thinking about technology to broaden your pool of prospects. So the third trend here, this sounds almost ominous. The great wealth transfer. We've many of us have probably heard about this, but a great wealth transfer is coming up in America to the tune of, well, we see stats between 84 and 86 trillion dollars. But what we do know, and actually this is sourced from the New York Times, most recently in May, from the Federal Reserve's financial accounts. But what we know is that roughly 84 to 86 trillion dollars is projected to be passed down from older Americans to millennials and Gen X through the next roughly 25 years. 16 trillion of that's going to be transferred within the next 10 years. So as you can see here, this is a big trend, right? Or a big thing that a lot of development, fundraising, advancement, people in the generosity sector are thinking about. 90% of this wealth that we're talking about here with this wealth transfer is held in non-cash assets. So with that, it's critical that we think about, who are we engaging? Are we engaging people that have given to us year after year? Are we engaging people that have only given us what we as an institution would call high or big, large dollar amounts? Are we building relationships with these individuals, with these millennials and Gen Xers that will be receiving this transfer of wealth? So you can see on the right side of your screen, the Generation X and the millennials. As you can see, the millennials, particularly, that line going up, the amount that's anticipated or to go up or inherited by each generation. So with this, how do we start to acknowledge this? How do we start to think about building these relationships with individuals now, rather than waiting until they're in their late 50s or 60s or 70s? A key thing that we're seeing actually many institutions do with good, I would call early success, is integrating planned giving. So when we think about planned giving, this would be giving a bit earlier, like what I talked about when we saw the Giving USA a pie chart, if you will. That would be, what about gifts that would be of life insurance, or a gift that you would put in your will? It's non-cash gifts. Oftentimes they are once a person passes away, but not always. It can be charitable remainder trust, all sorts of giving like that. The point here is, how do we engage? How do we think about our giving programs in as comprehensive as a way as possible? Some individuals might say, I really believe, right? I really believe in your mission, or I trust you. I believe my gift can make a difference. I have high value alignment with your institution myself, or I have a high affinity there. I went to college there. But I'm in my late 40s. I have 2 kids in school, whatever the different factors may be. This is a perfect time to start building that relationship, talking about how can they provide generosity in a way that works for them. Those planned gifts, in addition to maybe cash gifts as well. And I think a big piece of this is education. As you see here on the second bullet point, making sure staff are kind of armed or equipped with being able to talk to individuals, to prospects, to donors. What are their options? Or to let somebody know, if you want to, support your institutions, there are many ways to do it beyond, quote, a cash gift. And then the last thing here, when we think about implications with the wealth transfer, is reimagining a major gift. I think almost any institution, at least any college that we've worked with, has the label or the term a major gift, and there's a dollar amount associated with that. It might be $100,000 or $50,000. It varies for institutions. But when we think about reimagining major gift, what does that mean for how you engage with prospects and donors? Again, are you engaging those that have just given the highest amounts of giving? What about those individuals that haven't given, the highest amounts, but give to you every year. Again, this goes back to what are we anticipating in terms of that wealth transfer coming through. So with that, let me take us to our next trend here, which is the fourth out of the five trends: generational giving. We all, are living in what I'd call a fascinating time right now in America. Not only we have the wealth transfer going on, we have giving in America, rethinking about it, thinking about generosity. We have more generations than we ever have had before. Would we say 5 generations? There's not as much data now on what used to be called the silent and greats, but what we do know is that generations want to be engaged differently. And I think for us, it's critical to think about how do we use that data effectively to be effective in our own work. If you look here, the annual giving or the generational breakdown of total giving, the annual giving by generations, this is so interesting. We have Gen Zs, millennials, Gen X, and boomers. And sources will often cite years of the years kind of plus or minus a year. But when we think of the boomers, it's going to be right now the oldest, well, the silent and the greats, as they're called, are the oldest generation. But the boomers would be after that. So roughly 70s, early 80s, late 60s, then Gen X, millennials, and the youngest Gen Zs. So when you look at giving among the different generations, and this source of data is from Giving USA, the same research institution that provided Giving in America. They did a specific breakout for giving in generations just this year. What we know is that the biggest increase among the various generations has come from millennials. Over the last roughly 6-7 years, if you look 2016 to 2022, excuse me, there was a 40% increase of giving from millennials. It actually decreased from Gen X and even more with boomers. But this is to highlight who is coming up, right? Who are the people that we want to be engaging and thinking about? And who do we also know will be receiving roughly 16 trillion in the next decade? Millennials and Gen X from that wealth transfer as well. This is a breakdown of where are the generations giving, right? We know that there are different preferences, different ways they want to be engaged. All generations except for boomers or baby boomers support some form of health charity. We also know that boomers are the only generation that prioritizes giving to education. So with many of us being from education, then what do we want to do about that? Who is in our portfolio now? Who are our top donors or our prospects? And engaging and thinking about boomers. Gen Z, the youngest generation that we currently have data on, are the only donors who prioritize giving to environmental causes. And then the last point, which I think is interesting, the generation surveyed here in 2016, so that did not include Gen Z, have decreased their giving to places of worship in 2022. And I think this very much matches when we think at the beginning of our conversation and looking at Giving USA data, it goes back to the point that we made about giving to faith-based or religion has decreased. And this is another kind of example when we look at generational giving, they're decreasing their giving to faith-based or to places of worship. So when we think about the changing demographics, as we've said, Gen Z and millennials, right? They're likely to be probably in the middle of that gift pyramid that we talked about earlier. Fewer boomers are planning to increase their giving or their gifts in the coming years. But on the flip side of that, millennials and Gen X are expecting to increase their giving. And we also know that Gen X and millennials are projected to benefit, as we said earlier, with that wealth transfer. So while older generations are giving, older generations give to an institution. What we see, and we've seen this very much in our work as well, younger generations give to causes that may not have as much loyalty to a specific charity. They might give to more institutions or to more organizations. The way they want to be engaged, their relationships, as you see here, organizations need to work to build deeper engagement with younger donors. What we're seeing with many of our clients that are engaging Gen Z, millennial donors, they're asking very, very different types of questions than older generations. So, are we aware of what those are? Are we asking our prospects and donors? And then, how do we think about our engagement with them? We're seeing many of our clients have donors that are saying, I want to be engaged, I want to volunteer. And to that point, some are saying, well, I volunteer. That's my form of giving, which goes back to generosity, right? When we think about generosity, how do you define it? And some people might say, I give my time. So it's important to just think about the differences of generations, how they want to be engaged as well. And then this last slide here is really talking about, as we say, younger donors expect personalized messaging. And as you see on the right side, the percentage, 81% of Gen Z liking those personalized ads. I think partly the use of social media, the way the personalization is in place, but there is a high value put on that personalization. How do we as institutions then customize our messaging to do that? We've seen a big need in the advancement market, in the development market, for institutions to say we not only need to know who our best donors are, but we need to know what to say to them. We need to have clarity on messaging. They are requiring, they are asking for a more personally customized message relationship as well. So with that, let me pause here and do the fifth out of the six poll. And the question here is, does your institution market or engage either prospects? And I put students here knowing that some would probably be maybe an enrollment. So if that doesn't apply, that's okay. But does your institution engage prospects through affinities currently? Yes, not yet, exploring it, or no? And when we think about affinities, that would be things like athletics or clubs or extracurriculars that were outside of their class year. So I'll let everyone fill that in, and I'm curious what that looks like, and we'll let Adam share results.
As those results are coming in, Lee, we do have a question about some of the content you just shared that I will ask after we announce this poll result. So those results are still coming in, but it looks like roughly 35% say yes, 50% say no, and the rest are not yet, but they are definitely exploring.
Great. And please, the question, Adam, and then I'll try to answer that.
So the question, so I think a lot of this higher education audience consistently hears about the demographic cliff that we are entering for undergraduate enrollment, for instance. As you just talked about and shared some great stats with the generational wealth shift from the boomer generation to millennials and down, how is the world of advancement framing this conversation with their undergraduate counterparts on campus?
With their students?
As I think the question comes from like with declining undergraduate student enrollment, but then there's a lot of wealth transfer that obviously capital campaigns are kind of based around that, I assume, would be kind of the question there.
Yeah, so it's a great question. I've got a few thoughts, and if there's any other questions, please chime in. But a few things. One, I think it underscores the need, well, the demographic cliff that we all know is coming, right? I think underscores the need for us to be more expansive in our engagement with not only donors, but current prospects, and who is not on our radar. Who are we not thinking about? How do we, as an advancement shop or development shop, reframe the way we think about development, right? If we're if we're using the term generosity rather than philanthropy, how do we think about building our base of support? So an example, if we can anticipate an advancement that the number of alumni is going to be decreasing, right? Because that's going to be following the declining number of students. We must think differently then about not only our giving, but where it's coming from. So what about non-alums? When we think about friends, who are those in, for example, if you have a college in a town, kind of the town-gown relationship, who are those community leaders in your town or in your region that support the institution if that relationship was met, if they understand the massive economic impact impact that the college has. If they understand, for example, corporations and the number of students that the corporation hires and the deep, deep value from that institution, can you build relationships with those individuals that are not alumni? Again, it's thinking, what I call kind of more broadly, or redefining that, I think, is a piece of it. The other piece is students that are currently enrolled. And I don't know if this is exactly on topic, but I think it's at least apropos. Are they students being engaged, sought their feedback, their opinions on supporting their institution? Is it important to them? Do they understand that alums before them and others have given? Are they part of that conversation? Because I think that can also help strengthen the future alumni giving as well. So I hope that helps answer the question.
Perfect. Appreciate it.
Great. Thanks, Adam. So then the implications around the generational giving before we transition to our fifth and final trend would be tracking the data points, right? So what data do you track now? Again, thinking about the different generations beyond graduating class or alumni groups. What are the top 2 or 3 affinities at your institution that you could engage? Do you have a robust athletic program or a men's glee club or whatever it may be? What we have found predominantly over the last 5 to 7 years is a huge, huge increase, focus, time, and attention from institutions engaging affinities. I'll be honest, I'm a perfect example. My undergraduate was a school in Ohio, Miami of Ohio. I studied abroad, and that's really where kind of my heart is, right? I support only that institution's study abroad program because that to me is where I really align with believing I can make a difference in the mission. And then lastly, how do you engage your faculty and staff in generosity and advancement efforts? If there are deep relationships built, are you engaging your entire campus, your faculty and staff that either had relationships with close relationships with the students while they were professors, or the coaches, etc. So with that, let me shift us now into the fifth and the final trend, which is data and innovation are driving decision-making and investments. We're probably all in the thick of that, feeling that, seeing that now. Earlier, when we talked about AI, I think it's not only growing, but it's here to stay. How do we use it? This is actually from a Salesforce study that was done, and it said consumers are becoming more and more familiar, right, with AI and are aware of its many uses and its potential benefits. In 2022, a Pew Research survey actually found that about a third of Americans said they interacted, right, with AI at least several times a day. And the Salesforce study said that over 50%, 62% were willing to submit data to AI to have better experiences, right? It goes back to that personalization, the customization. As we think about fundraising, as we think about advancement, so many of these trends that at least I've talked about today, with having personal, deep relationships to drive the individual giving, which is a key trend, the broadening of the pyramid, that's going to be important, the wealth transfer. How can we use AI in a thoughtful, strategic, smart way to help us build and deepen those relationships, to account for these trends that are coming through or kind of coming on to the horizon? There are more and more tools out there that help address this. There's actually one, I'd referenced it earlier. It's helping to identify top prospects and demographics, and thinking about AI as well. It's actually something that we've partnered with Carnegie. But I say this as an example because it helps to show you the prevalence of thinking about how do we use AI to make our best to make our best decisions with our prospects. So with that, let me do the last poll here, which is, as you see here on the screen, are you currently using AI in your work? And when I say, are you currently using AI, it's going to be as broad as you would like to answer it. So yes, we're using it. Not yet. We're exploring it, or nope, not at all. So I'll pause a moment there and see what the results come back for the final poll here.
Yeah, great engagement with this question. It looks like roughly 35% are yes, they are using AI. 35 are dipping their toe in the water, but they don't quite know if they're fully implementing it to its full use or capability yet. And then roughly 25% haven't taken the plunge just quite yet.
Great, Adam. Thank you so much for helping on those polls. That's really helpful to see, because that to me is really encouraging to see so many people already saying yes, we're already using this. So the last thing here I would say before I would just open it up for any last questions would be customizing your communication. Right? I talked about the idea of different tools in the market, the idea of utilizing our time well to really hyper customize your work, your communication, your appeals. And what we are seeing more and more in fundraising and advancement is that our prospects, our donors expect that personalized messaging, right? We know that with the younger generation specifically, with very clear impacts and with a very clearly stated ROI, at least for some, that's going to be important. So with that, I'm going to pause and just first say, thank you again. It's been a lot of fun to be able to join all of you today in the conversation. I want to now ask if there are any remaining comments or questions over the next 5 minutes that I can help answer.
We did have one question come through the chat. The question is, how much do you see, in quotations, always on strategies, whether that be digital marketing or otherwise, for engaging donors across the entire pyramid versus more campaign-based initiatives?
That's I don't know, to be honest, if I have a really good answer. It's more of what I would say kind of a gut feel. We definitely see, as you said, kind of always on in campaign, or more so in campaigns. If not in campaign, I see it vary more among institutions. I do see more and more institutions thinking about, what does that look like? What does that regular communication flow? What does that look like if we're not in a campaign? But I think it really varies. I don't know if I'd have one set answer for that.
Perfect. Okay. Lee, I'm not seeing any more questions pop in. One more question. The New York Times recently published a piece about how there is a growing cultural divide about whether higher education is worth it. How do you see this impacting giving to institutions of higher ed in the future?
Yeah, I think I actually read that piece, and with that, I think it all comes down to making the case. And what I mean by that is, there are going to be some individuals that are going to say that it's not worth it, right? Or that doesn't resonate. And I have to say, then that's okay, right? For those that are either on the fence or do believe, are you as an institution, quote, making the case? Are you not only understanding that individual's motivations, pain points, things that are making them ask those questions, but also being able to show the story, being able to show the impact, being able to show the ROI. I think that's critical. I mean, I feel like long gone are the days where we'd have a donor say, well, I trust you. Here's a gift. I trust you. Right? No, there needs to be very clear understanding of the impact of the gift. And I'd say an ownership of institutions to say, are we transparent with our dollars, how we're using them, and everything else? So it's a good question, and it's I think a lot more work to be done on that. So with that, I would say, was there one more question, Adam?
One last question, which I think is a great one before we wrap.
Okay.
Obviously, a lot of our audience is either new to advancement or younger. If there's one piece of advice that you had for somebody that is new to advancement, what would it be? And just a shout out, thank you. This session has been great as well, from Caitlin.
Well, thank you, Caitlin. I would say that the one advice would be find a mentor. I was lucky enough to just find people that were willing to kind of let me ask him a bunch of questions, particularly when I wasn't even sure if I was on sound footing. Find a mentor and volunteer. The best way to learn fundraising is to serve as a volunteer and to sit in the role of donor. And when I say donor, I'm talking $1 or $1 million. It's about generosity, not about the size of the gift. So hope that helps and good luck.
Appreciate that, Lee. As we wrap up this session, are there any final closing remarks or statements from you before I kind of close up and direct
I would say,
to the next session?
yeah, thank you again. It's been wonderful. I hope this has been of value, and good luck in your work, and have a good rest of the day. Thanks again.
Appreciate it. With that, thank you for joining our session today. An enormous thank you to Lee for presenting such an in-depth and compelling story from the world of advancement. For all of our guests, be sure you head back to the agenda in Whova to take another look at the remaining sessions and add them to your personal agenda. I think Lee did a great job segueing also to our next conference session, which is actually operationalizing generative AI from some of our experts here at Carnegie. So join us directly after this session beginning at 2 p.m. Eastern. Appreciate it, Lee. Thank you, and wish everybody well.